Hello, welcome everyone. We at Citizens Regeneration Lobby have a special guest with us today, David Zuckerman. He is the Lieutenant Governor of Vermont, and he's currently running for governor. I am Alexis Badenmare. I'm the political director of Organic Consumers Association and Citizens Regeneration Lobby. Citizens Regeneration Lobby is a 501c4 organization, and that means we can endorse candidates. And this is very exciting because this is our first interview with an endorsed candidate this season in 2020. Then that makes Dave Zuckerman a very special person. And one of the things that makes him super special is that he happens to be an organic farmer. So how could we not endorse an organic farmer running for governor in the state of Vermont? Welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Alexis. I really appreciate it. And look forward to chatting about Vermont, Regen Ag, Organic Ag, and whatever else comes our way.
Fantastic. Well, first, I'd really love to know a little bit about your farm in Vermont and how long you've been in farming, and then we'll get to politics in a moment.
Sure. So let's see. I started farming back, I think, in '94 and farmed for other people for about 5 years. And even that stemmed from growing up both in the Boston area, suburban Boston, where we didn't have a farm, we had a big garden, but also in rural Virginia in a little homestead that my mom had bought when she was first married in DC in the Shenandoah Valley in a little town called Ida near Luray, for anybody who knows that area, Luray Caverns. Um, and I think it was there that I really fell in love with being in the outdoors all day on farm land and around farms. But when I came to UVM in Vermont, I started studying and I worked on some farms for 5 summers and then started my own farm in 1999 on rented land. And now from that, 1 acre of production, we've grown to about, now we own land in Heinsberg outside of Burlington. We grow about 20 acres of diversified vegetables. We're going to process about 1,500 meat birds this year. We're going to take 40 to 50 hogs to process this year. And then we sell about 100 piglets in the spring as well. And it's about 75% direct marketed to consumers through our own CSA summer and winter, as well as through the local farmers market in Burlington. And then we wholesale about a quarter of it. So it's busy, definitely busy.
Wow, that's really impressive. So that's not your only job. You're also the Lieutenant Governor of Vermont, and you've been in politics for a while. You're a young man, but you started out right as you were finishing college, right? You made your first run for political office at the end of your college career?
I did. I ran in the fall of 1994, and I did lose. I lost by 59 votes out of about 5,000 votes for the Vermont State House. I then graduated college in the spring of '95, and again was working on other farms and other odd jobs in the winter. And then in '96, I ran again and won, and I served 14 years in the House. There then was a 2-year break because that's when we went from renting land in Burlington to buying land in Heinsberg. So I was leaving my district. I couldn't represent it anymore. And then I did run for the Vermont Senate in 2012 and served for 4 years in the Vermont Senate. And then the last 4 years, I got elected in 2016 to be lieutenant governor for the last 4 years.
So what made you decide to go into politics? I guess you already knew you wanted to be an organic farmer. Why politics? Why did you need to do that as well?
Well, I actually didn't entirely know what I wanted to do. Both of the things sort of grew simultaneously. While I was a student at UVM, I was an activist on campus. I didn't really have a lot of interest in the electoral political world. I thought it was all paid off by corporate money, whether it was the right wing party or the moderate to moderate left party. Didn't really matter. They still were so corporate dominated with the money that it take to run campaigns. And in Vermont, of course, we had this guy who now everybody knows, but I didn't even know about him until I came to Vermont, Bernie Sanders. And he had been a one-term congressperson. He was running for re-election in '92. And I just got totally inspired, in part because of his passion for the issues, his direct statements to the issues, the fact that he didn't take any corporate money in his campaigns. And I volunteered for him. And from there, I just met all these other people who are really devoted to community political engagement and activism. So they were active in their daily lives on affordable housing, on chemical use on our public parks in our community of Burlington, just economic justice issues, healthcare issues. And they worked in those fields and they engaged in politics and they supported people that were running who could then work on the inside on what they were working on the outside. And that the two together, like I guess like a Kit Kat bar or whatever, or Reese's cup, I don't know, chocolate and peanut butter, could work together to really make the system better for everybody. And we're still working to make the system better. We have not cracked the nut, but more and more people are running for office all across the country saying, wait a minute, the political world does not represent everyday people. It is so dominated by money, by the pharmaceutical industry, by the chemical industry, by, all of these just industries whose bottom line is Wall Street, not people. And we're changing that. And we're changing it one election at a time. And hopefully this time is going to be another one of those changes.
Well, let's talk first about the political issues you've been involved in that have a connection to your profession in organic agriculture, because you bring real expertise to that. So I think the first that I was aware of you was when you started introducing bills on genetically modified organisms in Vermont. And then it got really super exciting because Vermont was the first and only state to pass a law to label genetically modified organisms. And I remember the first time I picked up a can of Pepsi and it said there, produced with genetic engineering right on the label. That was just because of the little state of Vermont passing one law at the state level, forced corporations nationwide to label all their products. Even a corporation like Pepsi, which is the largest food organization or food company in the United States, they had to label their GMOs because of what Vermont did. Can you tell us a little bit about how that campaign got off the ground and why Vermont ended up being the leader on it?
Wow. I mean, I think in some aspects of it got off the ground even before me. One of my heroes is a guy named Anthony Polina, who was working for a group called Rural Vermont. And they worked on the BGH and RBGH, bovine growth hormone conversation, which was really one of the first applications of genetic engineering, and to get labeling of that, at least in Vermont. And that started some of the grassroots efforts. And when I came into the political arena, I had come out of UVM as an environmental studies major, had learned about the Terminator technology, the flavor saver tomato, some of the potato potential that was out there. And it just blew my mind that corporations could control our food system with the ownership of seed, with those patenting of live organisms. And so I started introducing bills in 1999 and worked with groups like Rural Vermont to start going around the state talking in living rooms, church basements, libraries, coffee shops, just trying to raise awareness around what was happening to our food system. And in Vermont, where we're a small state, a lot of people have their own gardens, a lot of people had local farm stands they were buying from. There is a real food culture here, and it's even gotten stronger. We have a really good sort of restaurant, buy from farmer sense of things and really high quality food interests here in Vermont. And it was just shoe leather work for years, raising awareness around these issues and slowly passing different bills to the climax back in 2014 of passing the legislation to require labeling. And we won the first round of the court cases, which is why the massive agrochemical industry spent about $120 million lobbying Congress to destroy our bill with the Dark Act. And that's now Secretary of State Pompeo, and I think it was Stabenow in the House and some others who really, they took it away from us. And it's one of the most high highs that I've ever had in politics, and then one of the lowest lows when they just ripped it out from under us. When even many of the companies, like you said, they had converted. We gave them 2 years to use up all the inventory of their old boxes. They change their boxes and labels all the time for marketing purposes, from Christmas to Halloween to Easter to this to that. In 2 years they could all put those little old words on there, and they've completely absconded with truth in how they've created the new law. But we will continue to fight on. That's what we do, and we're going to fight on for our soil. We're going to fight on for agricultural production methods that are sustainable for the farmers as well as the land and the water. And You know, each hurdle gets placed and we jump over it. We're going to keep going.
That's right. Well, Citizens Regeneration Lobby, we used to be called Organic Consumers Fund. And as Organic Consumers Fund, we raised money from the folks who are watching today for these ballot initiatives and to help with the legislative fights around the country. And we consider ourselves part of the win in Vermont with your leadership. But I feel like, even though we did suffer that terrible loss when even some of our top allies, like the Organic Trade Association, decided to compromise and allow labels to be taken away at the federal level. It was really super depressing. But I've come back emotionally now that we've made so much headway on the issue of glyphosate and Roundup herbicide, with Bayer now owning Monsanto and having to pay out billions of dollars to the farmers and pesticide applicators and farm workers and landscapers, everybody who's been exposed to Roundup herbicide and who has gotten cancer from that. All of those lawsuits so far have been successful, and it looks like Bayer will end up paying billions to the people who they gave cancer to, which is only right, obviously. But I feel like the movement recentered and was able to get that very big win after that huge loss. And in some ways, I feel like getting at the crux of one of the things that makes GMOs so bad, this idea that you would genetically modify a crop to be able to absorb an herbicide that turns out to be carcinogenic. Of course, turns out, meaning we learned that, but Monsanto had evidence of carcinogenicity, if I'm saying that right, in Roundup, almost from the get-go, and yet hid it from the public, and now that's been exposed. So we've had some highs and lows in our movement, but I feel like we're coming back around. Another bright spot, I think, in the trajectory of the organic movement is the realization now that we need organic as one of the solutions to tackling climate change. And getting into the issues that are hot in the governor's race in Vermont, the incumbent governor, who you are running a campaign to unseat, he recently vetoed, I guess, a bill that would have tackled climate change in Vermont. Can you tell us about how you and the current governor differ and that whole saga?
Well, a couple of things. Every state is different. And in Vermont, the governor's seat and the lieutenant governor's seat are elected completely independently. So while often states are paired the way that the president and vice president are, we are not. And this governor and I, he's a very decent individual. We're lucky that in Vermont we can have reasonable disagreements and rational conversations, which I know in this particular moment in time might be a complete shock to your viewers all across the country, given the national political climate. But we have a decency and an institutional norm of respect here that's good. However, he has also vetoed many important bills, but one of them most recently was the Global Warming Solutions Act. And this was a bill to develop a climate panel of 23 people with appointees from the governor, appointees from the House, appointees from the Senate, with expertise in those appointments from all sectors of society to say, okay, we need to have comprehensive look at global warming and look for climate solutions that then can be implemented at the state level to really address this, because our future depends on it. I mean, Vermont, between maple, which is not only an agricultural product, but a huge tourism draw right now, by the way, incredibly beautiful in Vermont, as well as our ski industry, as well as our agricultural industry that normally gets steady and consistent rain in the summers, although that's been changing, unfortunately. All of these things are impacted by the climate. And if we don't do anything, we are going to have the climate of Virginia, 50 years from now, the climate I knew growing up 20 years ago in the mountains of Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. And it's just a very different reality. And so he vetoed this bill that was going to hold government accountable. So not only did it develop this panel, but it also said, when we as politicians, and I don't use that word very positively, and I don't think of myself as a normal politician, but when we as politicians make goals and promises that 20 years out we'll achieve this reduction in CO2 emissions, or we'll meet this clean water goal, those goals always sound good as political rhetoric, but they're almost never met because they actually take resources and dedication and work to make happen, which often isn't the follow through. Well, with the Global Warming Solutions Act, when a goal is set, if we don't achieve the goal, it gives citizens the right to sue the state to make the state work to meet the goal. Now, this is passed in other states. Massachusetts has it. They've never had to have a lawsuit because now that hammer is over the head of the political world, the elected folks are putting the resources in. They are changing policies to address climate, mitigation issues. And in my mind, and the work, of course, that you're doing around regenerative agriculture is a huge piece of that solution. Now, the current governor says, well, we're making progress. We're doing electric vehicle this and electric vehicle that. And he's putting a little bit in each year. And to reach our goal that we're supposed to reach in 15 years, at the rate he's funding it, it'll take 160 years to have enough electric vehicles on our roads. Well, we all know there is not 160 years. There's not 2 years to start turning this plane, this trip, this whatever we're on around. And so we need to make significant investments and not just rely on future technologies. The technology is here. It's been here for millennia. It's called photosynthesis. And if we can draw down carbon from the atmosphere and put it back into the soil, then we not only are helping with the climate crisis, mitigation of the global warming and the heating of our planet and the shifts that are happening, we also are making healthier soil for organic farms like mine and many of the folks out there who are consuming organic food. So it's a double win. In fact, it's a triple win, because then when the soil has more organic matter, it can absorb the heavy downpours that didn't used to happen, but now are happening. And absorbing that water means holding it for the roots, and it means not carrying nutrients off into the waterways, which has its own cascading problems. So I would like to see us, expand regenerative agriculture as a huge part of the solution towards the climate crisis.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, obviously, but especially for a state like Vermont. I did quickly look up before our talk that 11% of the acres in agriculture in Vermont are already organic. So Vermont is already creating healthy soil that creates healthy food that helps us be healthy, but also keeps the carbon cycle in balance and keeps it can stave off some of the worst impacts of global climate change if we act quickly. But agriculture is certainly one area where we can act quickly. It does require new technologies, as you've said. So let's go to some other issues in the campaign. Certainly, coronavirus is probably what most voters are thinking about in 2020. And along with our health and our concerns about the future because of coronavirus, we also are experiencing a terrible economic collapse because of the shutdowns and because of the way the coronavirus has impacted our economy. I'm sure that that's true in Vermont, just like it's true around the nation. What are the differences between how the governor is currently addressing coronavirus and the economy and what you would do?
Well, we are fortunate in Vermont, and maybe some folks have heard through the news that Vermont is probably handling coronavirus from a rates of infection and rates of death better than any other state in the country. And knock on wood, that's incredibly good. I want to thank our governor for his action, which was to follow science. Unlike some Republican leaders out there that just said, don't wear a mask, don't worry about spatial distancing. He did. He said, wear masks, spatially distant, wash your hands. And he deserves credit for that. So do the people of Vermont, who across the state did those things. In some places, people are a little more casual about this. And unfortunately, we've seen bad circumstances. In fact, even all the way to the White House now, where casual attitude has led to some more outbreaks. But in Vermont, citizens looked out for each other. Citizens stepped up and did mutual aid groups to help feed people, particularly seniors who are stuck in their homes. But the real question now is, how do we go forward out of this? Now that we've, at least in Vermont, stabilized it well, how do we move forward to put 50,000 Vermonters back to work, which in some states, that's a small number, but that's almost 10% of our population. So, we have to get those folks back to work. And I believe we could do it in a climate crisis mitigation way, which would be to ask our wealthiest folks, the folks making over $250,000 a year, who just got massive tax cuts from the federal government, to say, you know what? put half of that into Wall Street. But as a state, we would like to take half of that and pay to weatherize working class people's homes, to weatherize fixed income seniors' homes, to build efficient, affordable housing in our small town and village centers that have been depopulating, much like rural America all across the country. String broadband so that good paying jobs could be in rural areas, so that again, folks could live and work in the beautiful rural parts of Vermont, but make a decent enough living that they're not living in poverty. And all of those steps put people to work right away. That's good. And save people money, weatherization and renewable energy on their homes, and tackle the climate crisis, reducing energy waste in those homes. Broadband means that people could maybe work from home 2 days a week and commute 3 days a week immediately, cutting out 40% of their emissions in their driving to work and back. So I would like to see us do that. The current governor has said no to the Global Warming Solutions Act. He actually said no to his own panel of climate experts that put together 50 plus proposals, and he barely implemented and proposed any of them. And so that's a big difference between the current governor and I is, can we play a role in government to expand on climate mitigation strategies as well as save people money? And with those resources for the next 5 years, it would be a temporary tax on the highest incomes, those over $250,000. We could also put a chunk of that money towards helping farms become regenerative agriculture farms. And we could develop a market for our products in the southern New England, New York, New Jersey area where people have the money and resources, and we could be exporting to a geographically nearby location high quality food grown in ways that sequester carbon, build our soil, and feed our local region. Which to me, one of the big issues of the COVID crisis pointed out was our food supply system is very widespread across the country. But locally, many of us are not food resilient, and we need to be much more energy resilient and food resilient. I'm not saying isolate Vermont from everywhere else. Of course, we're all interrelated with all of our marketing systems and distribution systems, but we could be quite a bit more resilient in these ways with proactive policies.
Yeah, one piece of infrastructure that is could be beefed up and is meat processing. We really need more local meat processing, more on-farm and farmer-owned or worker-owned cooperative meat processing, and also dairy processing as well, I think would be good in that. Is that something that could be tackled at the state level? Certainly, most people expect their meat to be processed at a USDA slaughterhouse. So we do have to deal with federal regulations around that. But could the state be involved in investing in that local meat infrastructure?
Potentially, there's no doubt. We've had meat challenges here in Vermont. People ship animals east and west and south all the way to Pennsylvania, which why, if that demand is there, couldn't we do it here? And I do think investment, one of the things about a resilient system would be that we have a lot of really small farms. People grow 2, 3, 4 acres of vegetables or handfuls of animals. What if in regionally throughout the state, we had food processing centers, maybe not all of them being slaughter facilities, but some could be, and storage centers so that we could have more food on hand. My farm raises about 20 acres of vegetables. The maximum food we have is maybe 100 to 120,000 pounds of food right about now, actually, in the next few weeks as we're bringing in all the cabbage and carrots and sort of fall root storage crops. But in one day, the county I live in could eat all that food and it wouldn't even be a pound of food for every resident of our county. And we're one of the 5% biggest farms of this type of diversified agriculture in the state. And so we clearly don't have the food storage and capacity that we need. And I think the state could help with developing a much better, distributed food storage systems so that each farm wouldn't have to invest in a big walk-in cooler, but in fact, a town or every few towns, there could be one where far more food could be stored and distributed through the winter through regular marketing channels, but the infrastructure could be supported by the state to make us more resilient, for sure.
There's one other issue that our members care about quite a bit, which is natural health, the freedom to make one's own healthcare decisions, and to get a diverse array of healthcare options in the community. I understand that you passed an interesting law on Lyme disease on those issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sadly, it comes from personal experience. My spouse has been afflicted with Lyme disease for about 20 years. The worst of it was probably, well, now it's 25 years. Probably 10 years ago, when she really was maybe 25% of her former self. She would have physical episodes daily where her body would just shut down and she was incapacitated for 20 minutes to 4 or 5 hours, pain throughout her body, neurological Lyme issues where she'd put the telephone in the fridge or the milk on the shelf in the bathroom. I mean, just real serious issues. And we eventually found a Lyme literate doctor who used a number of both natural remedies and, as a practicing physician, some pharmaceutical, but it was a mixture that really, over the course of many, many months, returned her to some semblance of normal. She is not her old self. And it turns out, of course, he didn't take any insurance because it wasn't recognized as treatment practices that were allowed under medical guidelines. And I worked, one fact about Vermont that is not so great is that we are usually either top or second in per capita rates of Lyme and other tick-borne illness. Or TBDs, tick-borne diseases, for those that unfortunately know the lingo. And myself and a Republican legislator from the northern part of the state, teamed up and worked on our colleagues for quite some time to say doctors that practice under Lyme literate guidelines should not be sanctioned by the medical practice board for practicing in those alternative ways and treating Lyme, which does not have an absolute clear diagnosis, in these other ways that are healing people and making people better. And it was a political battle. The medical establishment was not thrilled to have the authority taken away from them to be able to punish these folks. But, I come from a Western medicine family. My dad was a cardiothoracic surgeon. That's lung and heart. He was on the team that put in the first on-demand pacemaker in the country back in the 70s, I believe. Maybe it was late 60s, but I think it was the 70s. And my mom had a PhD in biochemistry in the 60s, and then she went on to be a nurse. Like, I believe in Western medicine, but I also believe in all the other healing opportunities that are out there on our planet that existed before Western medicine. Our plants provide incredible nutrients for us, and various, was it tamoxifen, which is now, basically synthetically made to help deal with breast cancer. When you look at the root of so many of our pharmaceuticals, they come from traditional plant-based healing practices. Now, maybe they've been refined and they're more concentrated, and there's good to that. But it doesn't mean we should take away some of those plant properties that also have a much more complex profile to them that also, I think, helps the body. So I'm a firm believer in what Western medicine can do, but that doesn't mean we should ostracize what traditional medicines can also do, nor should we restrict people from working with them. Even the word placebo is an interesting word because, of course, the argument is if you get better, but it's because you just believe that you're getting better, and there's nothing in the placebo that had the medical properties of the tested drug. Isn't the goal to get better? So to me, I think we have to look at so many aspects of our society, whether it's medical or social and societal. Maybe all the solutions are not the one that is most apparent, but some combination of various solutions.
Well, I hear that you're running a very tough race. It's never easy to go up against an incumbent while they're in office, and you're like you said, your governor
Right.
isn't Trump, and that gets him a big pass these days. That's how I live in
Maryland.
There you go. Our governor, yeah, he's not Trump, and so people really say like, "Wow, what an amazing man he is!" Not to be a Republican like Trump.
The bar is low.
So
I've sometimes joked like the hurdle is so low that a snail could jump over it, right? I mean, like Trump is just, in that regard, with respect to democracy and our institution. I know there are folks out there in rural America that support him, and some of them are farmers and organic farmers, and fair enough. They want small government. They don't want government to be intruding in all aspects of our lives. But I think many of us believe in the decency and dignity of our democracy and respect for these conversations. And therefore, yes, my governor appears very cogent and reasonable in that regard. But he's vetoed more bills than any other governor in 4 years. He's about to surpass any other governor in all vetoes. He's like two away.
Well,
And he stood in the way of these issues. So,
well, I say we need a change. And if you're with me, if you're out there listening, let's let David tell us how we can support your campaign.
I do appreciate that. Vermont is a really cheap state, to be perfectly honest. A whole campaign for governor is under $1 million, which when you look at like U.S. Senate races costing $20 and $40 million, it's insane. So if folks want to help with small contributions, you can send them, or up to $4,000, but small is great. ZuckermanForVT.com, which I think is going across the bottom of the screen. You can reach out with an email to info@ZuckermanForVT.com, ZuckermanForVermont.com. If you have questions or you want to learn more, we have phone banking all over the country helping us out. We have emails, but really small contributions from everyone out there would make the difference. If 50,000 people gave $5 each, this would be over. I wouldn't have to raise another penny, and I could focus on going out and talking to people. We totally need campaign finance reform. I think we need public financing. The whole thing of dialing for money is just absurd. It gives some people with money way more power and time from those of us running for office. But if all of you out there just give $5, I wouldn't have to make any more calls, and I could focus on issues like the climate and rebuilding our economy with climate jobs and regenerative ag and sustainable ag and local food. And I would be thrilled. So that's how you can help out. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Well, David, thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to ask all of you who are watching to let us know about other candidates like David. I mean, maybe there aren't other organic farmers running for governor in 2020, but I'm sure that there are some folks who share David's values and share the values of the Citizens Regeneration Lobby Network. So please let me know about those folks, and we'll get them online to be interviewed before the election so that we can spread the word about good folks like David Zuckerman running for governor in Vermont.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, viewers. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.